Well, on behalf of Z, we would like to welcome you to our webinar, where we're going to discuss how critical content is when selling parts. So a simple title, content sells parts, but it has a very important undertone and a very important message that is often overlooked when we think about parts catalogs and how our customers are finding the parts they're looking for, ordering those parts. Are we absolutely certain they're getting the right part at the right time within the right diagnostic step? All of this can be driven by how well is the content that supports the part written. So content plays a crucial role in driving sales by attracting, engaging, and ensuring potential customers the provided information is aligned with the products being sold. So if your content is correct, it's linked up with your parts, that's going to give your potential customers more confidence in what they're buying, and they're going to be more likely to click that buy part from your website. So
Well,
I'd like to
hello.
pass it to Mike.
Hello, I'm Michael Smith, CEO here at Z. And to piggyback on the comments that Hal was bringing forward in the first introduction to this webinar, is that launching a company, we've realized that every single industry has a content funnel. You produce a lot of content that directs people towards a product or a service that you sell. And after about 10 years in technical writing for a manufacturer, we realized that manufacturers actually do have this technical content team. What they're lacking is a very efficient and scalable way of linking that content to a spare parts platform and ultimately converting that into a spare part sale. So what Z proposes here is that high quality technical information is a clear signal to your audience that you're there to support them when the eventual equipment breakdown happens or they're working on preventative maintenance. But also it's a way of building that loyalty and that trust with the customer, that when you map them or when you guide them, towards one of your spare parts, that they'll actually follow that link and purchase it from you. A, because of the loyalty, and secondly, because there's a very high probability that unlike aftermarket, you'll be providing the right part.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Trent. I'm a customer success engineer at Z. I have been in the technical documentation field for over 15 years, working with companies ranging in the size of Fortune 500 companies to startups. And I've had the fortune to, while working with these companies, see what their content workflows are like, and then guide them on how they're creating their content, how they're aligning their content with their deliverables, breaking down content silos, and really engaging companies in a content architecture disruption. And I say disruption in the sense of we're not trying to, in my experience, we're not trying to have customers rewrite every manual. We're just trying to get them to really focus on what are they writing and how is that content benefiting the end user. And what we find, and through these projects, what I found is the more structure, the better planning, the better processes for content flow creation. If all of this is thought up before starting a project, then you can start seeing how content affects different areas within the company. So today we're going to be focusing on how content will specifically sell parts, but in a traditional manufacturing world, what I've seen often is that parts catalogs and service manuals, user guides, they don't always align. So what we'll be talking about in presenting a story or a use case is how can you get that content to align with your parts so that you get the best of both worlds. You'll have an interactive parts catalog that's supported by your service manuals, and what's in your service manuals will align correctly. Maybe the serial number or the service parts number will certainly align with the parts catalog. So that's really where I'm coming from in joining Mike in this call today. So what is on today's agenda? Well, first and foremost, what are the expectations? Then what is the story? And we see ACME has lended itself nicely and allowed us to tell a story about them. And then finally, we want to make sure that we debunk myths that are prevalent within not just the manufacturing community, but in the overall writing community. And these myths can be showstoppers for a project or a story like we're about to tell with ACME. So what to expect? Mike and myself are experienced in parts catalogs. We've worked together at BRP. And the way that we work well is to have a casual conversation, but to make sure that we're hitting the key points. So you might find us going back and forth, but what we're doing is really trying to unearth the real question or the real problem so that you actually have a solution to apply it to. In the story of ACME, we are going to follow Wile E. Coyote's adventures in trying to capture the Roadrunner and seemingly never being able to because of the equipment he's ordering. And if you remember those cartoons, Wile E. Coyote constantly has his head in a parts catalog or in some document trying to figure out what's going on. So clearly, there is a misalignment between what he's paid for and received and what he's supposed to do with it. And then finally, again, debunking the myths, making sure that we're not letting old or not making sure that we're not letting the past ways of doing things affect our future.
Perfect. So in terms of what to expect and how to kind of take a tactical approach to changing these experiences is sort of what we alluded to at the beginning, right? We're going to reimagine the role in the technical content creator. You know, traditionally, parts catalogs were just part number, description, and that's about it. We have to kind of reimagine that in the way that, let's say, millennials are expecting to shop on e-commerce platforms, where you traditionally have, you have an image, maybe multiple images of the part to make sure that you kind of capture all of the information that you can visually. 3D models are even better. Then you'll have a name, a description, maybe extra information to kind of make sure that whoever's ordering that part is going to put the right part in their basket. So when we say we're going to reimagine the role of the technical content creator, it's kind of bringing them out of just the role of writing a procedure or documenting, a set of instructions, and really leveraging their knowledge of the product to augment your spare part catalog to effectively drive more sales. Secondly, we're going to be talking about how we can leverage 3D to automate an interactive part catalog. When we talk to a lot of manufacturers, 75 to 80% of the cost to create a spare part catalog is paying a person to create an exploded view with callouts. So we've come up with an innovative approach where we can fully automate a spare part catalog using the 3D models without the need to create any callouts whatsoever. This creates a very clean pipeline and enables a few things like serial number specific spare part catalogs at scale. And then finally, we're going to cover this in the myths as well, but how an e-commerce platform helps sell more parts. And this is a big, I'd say it's a big insight from the e-commerce community, but currently most manufacturers we know just receive orders and fill parts. Receive orders and fill the shipment. You're not tracking, for the most part, abandoned carts or upsell opportunities. And this is something that e-commerce platforms are really well versed at doing and providing analytics into that data. So we're going to be really presenting a framework, if you will, in this webinar and also in a subsequent white paper as to how you can leverage the team that you already have to drive quantitative data and customers towards your spare part catalog and increase your sales. Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Mike. And I just want to add on a little bit. When we're talking about reimagining the role of the technical content creator, typically we don't think of technical content creators as revenue sources or revenue teams bringing in actual revenue. But the reality is the quality of the content can directly reflect revenue. The challenge is placing an ROI on the value of that technical content. So in this project and in this reimagining how technical content can help sell parts, we actually start to see the metrics of that specific content and how it enables or potentially confuses customers when they're ready to buy those spare parts. So getting into that mindset of that technical content will sell. It has value. We look at Google, and Google is content, and they're very successful at generating revenue. So as a technical writer, as a content creator, and being in the industry for such a long time, I've found it to be very important to show companies why technical communication and technical content really needs to be viewed at the same level as maybe a marketing campaign, because that content truly does bring in value. It's just difficult, a little bit harder to pinpoint what the metrics for measuring that ROI will be. However, in this solution that we're going to show, it's a little bit easier to tie content to an e-commerce system where we have those metrics. Okay, so on to the story, ACME's story. Well, for those of you who are familiar with ACME, they've been in business for quite some time, really supporting one main customer, Wile E. Coyote, but he does enough business and essentially spends enough money with ACME to where they only need that one client. The problem, though, is this one client is habitually failing. And you have the question that you have to ask yourself before you look at any sort of solution or where you want to be in 5 years. You really need to understand where the issue is. Is the issue at the ACME Corporation level, or is the issue Wile E. Coyote? Do we have one of those situations where we're saying, well, our customers just can't do it because, for example, Wile E. is just not smart enough, or he doesn't have the ability to do what our products are meant to do? That might be a very dismissive way of looking at this problem. A better way would be to look at yourself or ACME as a company, take a look in the mirror, and try to understand why Wile E. is failing. And while you're doing that, you're going to first start with a manifest statement. So, a world leader in manufacturing, ACME wants to continue to sell their products, but they want to ensure their customer, Wile E., is successful and is not constantly facing failure. Because eventually there's going to be a new company that comes by, and if they are able to do a better job with their information, their technical content, allowing Wile E. to find the spare parts he needs to fix his products, be able to find the information on how to use those products, all of these things that go towards the end goal of creating a successful customer experience. It's important to look within this story on how we get there. So the way that we get there is we define what we're trying to do. Then we look at the really the problems that our customers are facing, or what are the blockers that are preventing us from getting to our end goal. So here we have a disconnection between content and parts catalogs. So right now, ACME needs to figure out how to solve that issue. And what they're going to do is they're going to go out and they're going to find a guide. And this guide is Z. And at Z, what Z is going to do is they're going to help ACME understand what's working, what's not working, and then they're going to propose a plan with a content strategy and a catalog strategy that align with one another so that they can then take the next steps moving forward. Now, the goal of Z is to provide the software and guidance and a plan, but it's actually going to be ACME that needs to execute this plan. So essentially, in this story, we're going to learn how ACME executed the plan that Z provided that allowed ACME to better support Wiley and then avoid these error-prone tasks where we constantly see Wiley making mistakes. So ACME is a manufacturer of bespoke Roadrunner capturing equipment. Say that 10 times in a row, and I think you might go crazy. But what we mean by bespoke here is that what they're selling is very much meant for their manufacturing products are meant for capturing Roadrunners. And they offer base solutions, but they also offer these bespoke solutions. On top of that, they sell equipment in multiple countries. Even though we think of the chase between the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote only occurring in the American deserts, the reality is this is going on all around the world. There are Wileys in all parts of the globe wanting to get their hands on Roadrunners. We have at ACME the need to be able to support multiple languages. So if there is a concern about a product, that a customer service team can take in that call, can speak the same language. We can also produce manuals that are in the correct language for the correct end user. ACME needs to have a better look at their dealership distribution model. So how are they actually getting the product to the end customer and ensuring that it's the right customer and the right product? Part of their requirements to their dealers are to send parts requests by email. So right now, they don't have a very robust system for tracking what Wiley's ordering. He goes online, he orders, that generates an email, and he's ordering from simply a catalog, a parts catalog, and hopefully what they send him is what he's looking for. So this is where we want to look at what is the initial problem. And I believe we've defined quite a few points that ACME is not currently hitting on. And this is preventing them from accomplishing their goals. So we have here, again, Wiley looking frantically through this catalog to find what he needs. We see on the left the setting. Where is he? What is he trying to do? The predator, who's trying to accomplish this, and what is the product that they're using. So what we found when we went in and asked ACME how they were doing things, we found that products fail or backfire catastrophically at the worst possible times. Wiley's direct access to parts is only through ACME's outdated published parts catalog. So right there, we see that if there was an issue with a particular product, that information is not going to get to that PDF. And Wiley is going to be working with misinformation, possibly playing Texas Hold'em with a deck of 51 cards as opposed to 52. He just doesn't have the information. Not only does he not have the right information, but the service manuals to support what he's trying to accomplish with these manufactured goods do not line up with the current catalogs. So if he is going through a procedure, there's no guarantee that the part that's being referenced in the service manual is the exact same part in the catalog. So this is a real issue. And at the end of the day, Wiley has to ask himself, at what point do I become a customer of, we'll call it ACME? But at some point, his goals are not being met, so ACME is unable to accomplish their goals.
Perfect. And so this is typically about the point where we enter the story. So like Hal said, we take a bit of time to understand what the real challenges are. But oftentimes, what we notice is that the manufacturer has pretty good 3D models for the equipment that they manufacture, especially if they have bespoke equipment. That means that engineers have to validate that this design is going to meet the needs for this specific customer. And most of the time, the way they accomplish that is by building a 3D model and validating it digitally before that equipment enters into production. And then what we've also noticed is that same 3D model typically gets used to create the equipment documentation. So the big question we asked is, if you could leverage that 3D model all the way downstream, not just for engineering and manufacturing purposes, but if you could leverage that same 3D model throughout your entire life cycle of the product, extending all the way to service and spare parts, could you? And what would be the impact of that? And so typically that's the first question we ask to the manufacturers, and start chipping away at that problem. What do the 3D models look like? What type of data is associated with them? Because effectively, what we're going to accomplish with manufacturers that choose this path is we're going to start adding information to that 3D model. This is why we keep talking about content, because we're adding after-sales content to that 3D model to enable customers down the line to replace a traditional PDF or table of contents with an interactive, easy to use, easy to understand 3D model that points them to the information that they need in record time. And so we have something that we call a success plan. And what it really is we look at that burning issue, that pain point. For each manufacturer, it's a little bit different. One might have thousands of unique pieces of equipment that they literally just cannot create content for at that scale. You need some sort of way of adapting the content to each permutation and combination of the parts that they have on that equipment to be able to maintain it. Others, they revise the same part very frequently. So it's not that they have different serial numbers and too many different products, it's just they have many versions of the same product. And by understanding what the core need is, we can help architect a solution and an implementation that goes and, I guess, delivers on or against that objective. So what we say is the very first step is actually just taking a step, right? It's not thinking about, how are we going to roll this out to 100 countries and 20,000 models and 22 million parts. It's saying, if you could do this for one piece of equipment, what are the rules that you need to understand? What are the questions that you need to answer to be able to do this on the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth? And contrarily to a manual approach, which dictates that you need to create an exploded view and callouts for each system, what we're more interested in finding is, what are the rules? And what I mean by that is, every manufacturer, although they're unique, they do have to follow a certain set of rules and processes to be successful in their industry. And so we work really, really hard to uncover, how do you know if a part is serviceable or not? What's the price? Is it sold as part of a kit? And really helping the manufacturer establish content guidelines or increase the quality of their data. Internally, we just call this, establishing good data hygiene. But building data into their processes, which will then basically automate a lot of the tasks down the line, because once the rules are there, you can apply them to your processes and deliver a bespoke experience for each one of your customers that purchases your equipment. Thanks, Hal. And the results, well, I think it kind of, before we continue the discussion, the results, maybe we actually just jump in and show you what it looks like. But as a precursor to that, we're going to show you some, well, I think 3 models from Motrec, which is a local Quebec-based company. And the particular challenge that they were facing is that they have thousands of unique serial number specific models. And it just wasn't feasible with the existing tools on the market to create a specific spare part catalog for each one of their vehicles that gets shipped to a specific customer. So what was actually happening, or their sort of trade-off was, do you have a generic manual that creates ambiguity when you're looking for those parts, like in Wiley's example, or do you take the time to create a specific catalog for each piece of equipment? They chose that, providing a better customer experience, which means creating a serial number specific catalog for each model, would actually save a lot of time on their customer, but also on the support staff. So here I'm going to show you 3 examples of different models where an end user can query the 3D model to find their parts. Al, can you let me know, just confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, sir, I do.
Perfect. All right, so here's the first model. And first thing you'll notice is, unlike traditional spare part catalogs, we don't have a system-based approach, although we can see, body sections over here. But we've tried to absolve the user from having to take a system-based approach. The reason is, you don't always know what part a system is in. So here what we're doing is we're jumping straight in, ordering a switch, and adding it to the shopping cart. Let's repeat that for another part. Maybe we want the brake pedal. Right here, we can jump in and add the entire brake pedal to our shopping cart. And so here we just ordered parts from two very different systems, right? One from the electrical system and one from the braking system, without having to, go forward and backwards, in a spare part catalog or change systems. What's more interesting is, how do we actually get to this, right? This is a very unique vehicle. It's not a generic model. So let's go back. We're going to go shop for parts on another vehicle. So I'll go back to home, and I'm going to enter in the serial number for another model. And here you can see that we have a slightly different model. And so what this is kind of showing is that the user isn't constrained to searching through various sections, choosing different markets for their model, basically choosing from a never-ending pick list. It is quite simple. Whereas if you're a manufacturer and you have serial numbers, Z works with you to map those serial numbers to the correct 3D models, and then enables that interactivity for your customers. So here, maybe in this scenario, we want to, maybe we want to see what's behind here. Oh, and we want the USB charger. Let's add that. And we're going to go shop for parts for one more vehicle. In this case, we're going to put in, I think that's the number that we're looking for. Here you go. Again, a different model. And for this one, just to keep things simple, maybe we want this emergency button. So from here, I'm going to stop sharing. That means it's coming back to you.
Yes, yeah.
But I'd like to point out, a couple of benefits that we were able to achieve with this project. So the first one I can say is that there were no manually created views for this project, which also means that if something changes, it's incredibly easy to update. We don't have a complicated workflow of going from 3D model to some 3D authoring tool, to generating callouts that match a bill of materials, to saving a 2D illustration, to uploading it to a spare part catalog software, and then ultimately publishing it to the web. What we've provided here is a solution with Motrec that monitors engineering changes and synchronizes them on, I believe, a daily basis, after which they get published straight into the spare part catalog. The part catalog rebuilds these models on the fly, meaning that if something were to change, just hitting refresh would actually load that change in, as long as it was pushed all the way through to production. Secondly, with this approach, we've been able to automate the production of thousands of serial number specific models, something that would require content teams probably years. We've been talking to other manufacturers who've approached, creating just, I'm not talking about structure for a part catalog, but just the views for their spare part catalog. It initially often gets scoped as a multi-month project with an intern, but in reality turns into a multi-year project, given the different permutations and combinations. And oftentimes this gets given to somebody who isn't a content strategist. So they have to determine and kind of learn by trial and error how to single source illustrations across multiple models. And so that creates a little bit of a content tracking nightmare, where you have to kind of understand, map, remember what illustration was used in what catalog. That's fine for the first shot, but then what happens is a part changes. Engineering pushes out a revision, purchasing decides that they're replacing that part with another part, and it's very, very easy to lose track of where your illustrations have ended up. So Zea's approach is very much to create those illustrations on the fly, build the 3D model in real time, and leverage a single source of truth, much like a 3D content management system across all of your catalogs. Secondly, maybe thirdly, the approach, or how this actually fits into a manufacturer going through a digitalization process, is the product documentation that you normally output has all of the warnings, maybe some setup instructions, and typically gets followed by several pages of exploded views and spare parts for that piece of equipment. What we've noticed in the manufacturers that we work with is they still publish their operators guides and repair instructions, because that's a mandatory piece of documentation. But from there, they just link to their dealer portal that hosts this 3D spare part catalog, making it so that if there was an update to it, you don't have to create a new version of your equipment documentation and send it to all your customers. You always want to link from the static to the dynamic. So your static becomes the setup procedures, and the dynamic is your spare part catalog, where you're free to change prices, change part numbers, and manage your super session strategies. And then finally, one last thing that we'll get into a little bit more in the myth discussion is that a challenge that often gets presented is that an experienced, let's say a person with gray hair, will be challenged by navigating a 3D spare part catalog. But what we've actually been able to notice is that within 20 minutes, even somebody who's very set in their ways is having fun and exploring the 3D model and learning a lot about the equipment almost intuitively through this. Whereas, similar conversations with spare part service managers have said that it takes, about a year to onboard a new employee. Just teaching them what parts are in what systems, what are the parts are called, so on and so forth. And every time that we've presented them with a 3D solution here, their jaws have dropped and talked about how less time it takes to onboard a new personnel. And we're talking hours, minutes in some cases. So thanks for that opportunity to showcase what a 3D part catalog actually looks like. Well, I think we didn't leave too many rocks unturned in this conversation. It's an initial sort of thought leadership conversation around getting manufacturers to realize that they have all of the tools at their disposal. ACME has everything at their disposal. They have products, they have content teams, and everything else that they need to help Wiley out. It really is just a matter of building the plan, executing on the strategy, and sticking to it. So if you think that this sounds interesting, if you'd like to get in touch with Hal or myself, or if you want to learn a little bit more about Zea's position on this, or maybe some of the software and services that we offer, you can check us out at zeengine.com.